Now it is a great pleasure to me to introduce a young person but old friend of Serbia, Michel COLLON, a journalist, writer and historian from Belgium, who will address our conference on on wars for recolonization and war propaganda. Mr. Michel COLLON from Brussels.
Hvala lepo. 16 years ago, I was here in Belgrade with a delegation of 15 Belgians while NATO was bombing your country, something you can never forget. And actually, we all knew, and I wrote, that your country was bombed with a lot of media lies and disinformation campaign, but actually your country was bombed because it didn't want to be on the knees before multinationals. You wanted to keep social justice. You wanted to keep your army and your independence and not become a member of this gangsters association called the NATO. And you didn't want to help NATO and the USA to encircle Russia, what had started already, plus, of course, the strategic position of the Balkans. So, coming back here, I wish to thank you deeply for the resistance you have brought to this NATO aggression. And of course, I know times are not so good, but history is much longer than our lives, and you maintained hope, and I'm sure the sun will come back. There is one thing, Mr. Javier Solana was right. When the war in Bosnia finished, he wrote, "The experience acquired in Bosnia will serve as a model for future NATO operation." This was right. Actually, I wrote in this book on Bosnia that NATO would attack in 3 directions. Excuse me. Towards Russia and Caucasus, towards Middle East, and towards the South, the Third World in general. And this happened. NATO attacked one country in Europe, Yugoslavia, attacked one country in Asia, Afghanistan, attacked one country in Africa, Libya, made military maneuvers against Venezuela, and they would have attacked a lot of other countries if they were not stopped. This, Solana was right, exploitation for the NATO as the cop of the world, the cop of the multinationals. Another method was used, hidden coup d'etat with so-called NGOs, and these countries suffered a lot also from that. And this technique has been exported to in many other countries where have been destroyed after that. Actually, this war and the war against Iraq was the first chapter of a war of recolonization of the world. United States, a declining economic power, is engaged in a global undeclared war to maintain its supremacy. And this means, as Brzezinski explained, to maintain the vassals in a dominated position, maintain Russia, maintain China, maintain all the countries of the South under the domination of the empire. And for this, goal, United States employs systematically, well, you know the meaning of that word, balkanization. This is the key method. Brzezinski, the key strategist in Washington, said once, we need to divide Russia in three. And of course, you imagine that the oil and the gas would not be in the same place, in the same part as Moscow. And this happens because United States is a bankrupt economy and it can survive only by plundering, which means war. In 2001, Wesley Clark, sorry for mentioning this gangster, Wesley Clark visited somebody in the Pentagon. He was just retired, and he mentioned later a discussion with somebody in the Pentagon. I just received, he said, a memo from Rumsfeld. We, the United States, are going to take 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finally Iran. 7 countries, 5 years. Of course, there was resistance, but this shows the goals and the methods. And because United States are in decline economically and also politically and militarily, although all appearance, this means they need to use the strategy of chaos, as we gave a title for one of our recent books, applying the African proverb, what you cannot control, destroy it. And this method is applied in many, many countries now in the world. And for that, of course, you need to use clash of civilization. Living in Brussels, you can imagine that I'm now hearing a lot of speeches of hate from all sides, but the key question is, my government and the media want, with these speeches, to hide their economic and the failure of their economic and social policy. The office of Investig'Action, my team, is in Molenbeek, the most well-known part of Brussels now in the world, with a media campaign. I have no problem living there. It's very nice, very quiet. Of course, gangsters can hide there. They can hide also in Monaco and in Paris and in London. But all the people are very nice. But there is a problem in Molenbeek. Poverty, huge poverty. Half of the young people of migrant origin, they have no job. They can't not get a job. Plus the racism with this. So, and we had years of neoliberalism and suppression of every social policy. So, you cannot send young people from 18, 20, 25 in the street all the day and be surprised if they are influenced. And you cannot be surprised because they are influenced by the hate speech spread by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, our good allies, our government and our businessmen and our media. They go anytime in Riyadh, oh, now Saudi Arabia moderate with all this financial of the hate speech and the intoxication of this poor young generation. I insist, those young people who commit those horrible acts, they are victims too, really, they are victims. Actually, in my last book, Am I or Am I Not Charlie? Reflections on War, Terror, Islam and Liberty of Expression, I tried to explain to my people, because it's forbidden to speak about this in our media, I tried to explain that what is called Islamism, and this is not a good word because it has nothing to do with religion, is a fabrication of the USA. This is a fabrication with the help of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, but the plan is a CIA plan. And I showed first it starts with Brzezinski again, organizing the Bin Laden operation to overthrow the government in Afghanistan, to attract Soviet Union in that time in a war. And Brzezinski recognized it 20 years later. And he was very proud to have done that. And the journalist told him, yes, but you gave power to Islamists. Oh, no, not a big problem. 3 years before September 11. Okay, Brzezinski. So this was used against Afghanistan, and then in Bosnia, and then in Kosovo, and then in Caucasus, and then in Libya, where I was too, again, under the bombs of NATO. And I saw the same thing that happened here. Hospitals attacked, children on the ground, people bombarded by humanitarian missiles of the NATO with the taxes of French citizens, Belgian citizens, British citizens, and with the help of our media. This happened in Libya, this happened against in Syria. So I'm calling this the Operation Bin Laden bis, because it is the United States, they do not dare to send their soldiers anymore on the ground. With Vietnam, they have learned. With Iraq and Afghanistan, Bush took a little bit more time to learn, but they have learned also, and so they don't dare. So they need another army, and they recruit these young, desperate guys as an army, a substitution army, and so on. So I think we should absolutely need, on the model of the Russell Tribunal, a public commission of investigation about the links between United States and terrorism, because the opinion in the West doesn't know. It is very, very important. And of course, this war of recolonization needs the classical strategy of the colonizers: divide and rule. In Yugoslavia, you have a lot of experience about this divide and rule, so I don't need to explain. I would like to thank Mr. Yakunin for mentioning this morning that it is not about clash of civilization. It has nothing to do, and it is not about religion, because George Bush, the Christian, made a war against the Muslims of Iraq. Shall we send all the Christians into hell for that? By the way, Bush made war in the name of, tried to assassinate Hugo Chavez, a Christian. And by the way, Muslim Saudi Arabia is helping United States against Palestinian Muslims. So it has nothing to do with religion. It has just to do with business and the dollar. And in front of these hate speeches, we need, as it was said, more fraternity and struggling together, fighting together for peace, all together. I mean Christians, Muslims, Jews, non-believers, everybody in the same struggle for peace and social justice. I would like to mention that this war of recolonization is not only a war of United States against the world. It is also a war of 1% against 99%. In these days, in Brussels, you have many comments. How is it possible that Europe cannot find a solution for the problem of these migrants who are coming into Europe? Strange. They cannot find a solution. The reason is they are creating the problem. They are not the solution, they are the problem. You cannot destroy Syria and Iraq for imperialist goals and then be surprised that the people cross the Mediterranean to try to save their lives and their families. There is not only wars, there is also neocolonialism. You cannot destroy the life of the peasants in Africa by throwing a lot of products, by plundering their raw materials and not paying them, and by controlling their countries with dictators and corrupt leaders and so on, and then being surprised that these people say, well, we cannot live in our country, so we are going to try to save ourselves coming into Europe. This is pure hypocrisy. They are not the solution, they are the problem. I would like to say, in the last part of my intervention, the crucial importance of the battle of information. Donald Rumsfeld once said, you see I have good quotations, Donald Rumsfeld said, "Internet is a war." He was right. And the United States consider now internet as a war. We have published recently a book about the manipulation of the revolts in Tunisia, Egypt, and so on by the United States with the complicity of Facebook, Google, and Twitter, and so on. This has to be studied. Those who know my books before know that, from my experience, I have taken this conclusion. Each war starts with media lies. Wars do not start with bombs, wars do start with media lies. And in Yugoslavia, you had Račak, you had Rambouillet, and all this story about they don't want to negotiate, we try to find a solution, they are making massacres, we are just helping the victims, and so on. I may tell you, this happens in every war that I have studied after this, and actually, this is organized by PSYOPs, psychological operations experts. And this follows the what I've been calling the 5 principles of war propaganda. If you are the president of the United States or France or Great Britain, there is one thing you may not say about the war, it's the truth. You may not say we are going there for money, for oil, for minerals, for strategic position. You will have no support. The 5 principles of propaganda war is first, hide the economic interests. Second, hide the history, what colonialism did in this area. Third, demonize your enemy. Fourth, pretend that you are coming for the victim against the aggressors. And 5, monopolize, impede the debate. Impede, if there is a war, there are 2 opinions at least. But in all media, you have only one, the good ones. And the other one, you may not hear them. 5 principles of propaganda war. In 2000, approximately 1 year after the war, I had the pleasure to have in Brussels a public debate with Mr. Jamie Shee, the speaker for the NATO. You remember him. I had also the pleasure that after approximately the half of the debate, he was so obsessed by the arguments and the facts that he ran very quickly, and this was recognizing that he had been lying. And actually in the debate, he did recognize that it was propaganda. But I was not happy, of course. This was coming too late. So my conclusion is, what do we need now? If we do nothing, they will continue. And we have been talking about Cold War. I don't find it so cold. Of course, not many Europeans are dying. But if you consider the South, some people say 40 to 50 million people have been dying because of the wars of the United States. Of course, it could be worse, but it could be better. And I think what we need is study the strategies of the United States in a very complex and fast-changing world. But I have no time to study that, to talk about this. Study the CIA methods to destabilize countries, overthrow governments, and manipulate the public opinion in the West. But no time for this. I would just like to develop one point. And also, of course, we need to build an anti-war movement. We never had so many wars, and there are no demonstrations anymore in Brussels, in Paris, or in London. The movement has disappeared. I think to rebuild this movement, the first question is the war of information. Investig'Action, the small team I have created in Brussels, is making a newsletter, a web page. Everybody can subscribe by giving the email. It is in French, in Spanish, a little bit in English, little bit in Arabic. We would like to realize it and translate it in other languages, so this is a call for help. We are publishing books in French and Spanish. We would like to publish them in other languages here also. And we are starting video channels. Since television is completely under censorship, we need that to attract the young people, to present the voice of the victims, to present the voice of those who are demonized and who don't receive the word in my media in my country. To realize this, I think we need more coordination. And I would like really to build a network here that can be in relation with us and help spread information about, excuse me, I'm still calling this Yugoslavia, to bring information about your country in the West, because nobody knows the truth about that. Building a network is not a task for specialist journalists or strategists and so on. This is the work of every citizen. Really, with internet now, we may not leave the information to the Western media. It is too important. We have to do it ourselves, and we have to engage all in this war of information. So I thank very much the organizers for this very good initiative. I hope that also in the daily work we have the participation of more women, more young people, and more non-white people also, because if we talk about international peace and fraternity, we need to have participation of everybody. So my conclusion is this. I have studied the impact of the media lies against your countries and the destruction of your country. Since that, I have studied the media lies against many other countries, and I hope I will not finish my life only studying media lies, but also building a bridge for good information, peace and justice. Hvala lepo.